New York City and London have each been called the greatest city in the world, but they're not easy places to live.
New York City is home to more than 8.3 million people and was ranked one of the most expensive cities in the world in 2022, tied with Singapore. Whereas London, with its nearly 8.8 million residents, was deemed 28th most expensive. The cost of living in New York is higher than in London. It would cost approximately $9,500 a month to maintain the same lifestyle as about $7,200 would get you in London.
I spent so much more money when I was in New York.
But New York City residents tend to earn more money than Londoners, so businesses are able to charge more.
Without any contest, New York is a lot more expensive than London. The appetite for price gouging, I think, is much stronger here. Like, there is much more of a sense of just like, what is the most I can possibly charge? Rarely do they feel that way in London.
UK residents tend to pay more in taxes than people in the US, but the difference is less stark in New York City than the rest of the country.
In general, the tax burden in Europe is far higher than it is in the States. On the other hand, that also means that a lot of kind of what we would deem public services is much more expensive in the States because you have to pay for that on top of the taxes.
The difference between New York versus what you would see in London isn't as large for, local income taxes, but it is significant for sales taxes, where you have relatively low sales taxes within New York. The UK has a value-added tax of 20%.
So how much does it cost to live in New York versus London? And why are people willingly paying so much?
Hi, my name is Lucy, and I'm a 25-year-old New Yorker living in London.
Lucy has been challenging herself to limit her weekly budget for everyday expenses to $150.
This is day 2 of trying to spend less than $150 in a week living in London.
It was so interesting to compare how expensive New York is with other cities across Europe. It really makes you conscious of how much you're spending.
Let's start with your biggest expense, no matter where you live: housing. Rent prices in New York City are about 47% higher than in London.
A one-bedroom in the city center averages around $3,800 in New York. In London, a comparable apartment would cost nearly $2,600.
Rent is cheaper in London. In New York, my apartment was $1,800 a month for a not tiny, but not gigantic studio. It's like a walk-up building, there's no laundry in the building, we couldn't control the heat, so like mid-tier apartment. In London, I pay £1,300, which I believe is about $1,600 for a room in a 6-bedroom house. We have laundry, we have a garden, we have a gardener, we have a housekeeper. I do think the current house that I'm in is expensive for London, and I would be able to find something cheaper if I wanted. I've never had a backyard before, and it's so nice, and now I don't want to leave it.
Hi, I'm Slater. I grew up in London. I now live in a studio apartment in Prospect Heights, which is an equivalent neighborhood, is like an Islington in London. There, I could get a 1-bedroom for the cost of my studio.
Grocery prices also are 70% higher in New York. Except for milk and cigarettes, common food items are between 27% and 220% more expensive in New York.
Groceries here are so cheap. Every time I go to the grocery store, I am shocked at the prices. Like when I check out, I'm like, in New York, this would be double.
There were things I bought all the time, like a pint of yogurt was like £1. You got it at Tesco at like a normal grocery store in London, and then here it just is, $7 or $8 very frequently.
New York is also more expensive when it comes to having fun.
The culture of spending is just so major here. Social things mean spending money. Like if you go out for dinner and it's really expensive, or you go to a show and it's really expensive, and there are just affordable ways to spend time with your friends and your family in the UK, in London at least, that just don't really exist here, because there are things like pubs that are affordable, because a lot of people in their 20s live in nice houses with living rooms and dining rooms and kitchens.
Tipping culture is also a big part of the US, with restaurants and bars expecting 15 to 25% gratuity on service on top of taxes and potentially a service fee. This can significantly add to the cost of going out.
Alcohol can be a lot cheaper here. Like you can get a pint of beer for like £4, but then they still have places where it's like 19, 20-pound cocktails, which is the same in just New York, where you can get a $25 cocktail and feel really bad about yourself afterwards.
New York may be more expensive, but New Yorkers tend to make more money and are taxed less than Londoners.
The average New Yorker earns a little less than $1,400 per week, whereas London's average is a little less than $1,000 or 805 pounds. Because of this, local purchasing power in New York is about 19% higher than it is in London.
When I got my most recent job and I got a pretty big pay bump, and my dad, who lives in South London, was like astonished by how much money I was going to be making. And then he came to visit me like 2 weeks later and was like, oh yeah, that must not go very far. Because he was, going, and he and his girlfriend bought a coffee and it cost $15 for just 2 coffees or whatever.
But we also have to factor in taxes.
In the United Kingdom, income tax rates are set for the whole country. They're progressive, which means that as you earn more money, you will pay a higher marginal tax rate.
The UK has 4 tax brackets, with the highest rate set at a little over £125,000 or around $157,000.
Compared to US income tax brackets, that's a relatively low threshold for such a high rate.
It's more difficult to figure out exactly how much New Yorkers pay in income tax because, unlike in the UK, we have state income tax. So we don't have a clean table of tax brackets like the UK.
New York has the highest top personal income tax rate when you combine state and federal than anywhere else in the country. But the state tax system layers on top of federal tax rates, so you can have folks who are making relatively modest incomes or modest incomes for New York City that are facing tax rates that are into the high 30s and low 40s.
My friends just ignore a third of the figure of what their salary is going to be, and I do the same thing. So I think if it is marginally different, it's either side of that number. I think I might be 28 and she might be 32 or something, but it's pretty close.
We also have to factor in consumption taxes, which are taxes on things that you buy. Those are called sales taxes in the US and value-added taxes in the UK.
The value-added tax in London is set at 20% for most goods and services. In New York, total sales tax is about 9%.
But there's one crucial difference. In the UK, taxes are built into displayed prices in stores. In the US, you have to do that math on your own.
It's more part of the way you budget. It's a number that you don't even think of as being separate to the cost of things, and here it's 2 separate things, and I think that makes it feel more like a burden here, even if it is less money.
You may be wondering, if there's a 20% tax on goods in London, why are things less expensive? Well, there's a lot going on behind the scenes when it comes to how businesses are paying taxes, but that process depends on what country you're in.
Businesses also pay that tax when they're buying things for their business. And this can lead to additional tax burdens where the business buys the thing and they build the thing and then they sell the thing, and there's taxes all along the way. Even at a 5% rate, this can build up into kind of a pyramid structure where their total tax burden across the supply chain is relatively high. Value-added taxes are calculated differently. The business is able to get a rebate for the tax that they paid at an earlier stage of the process when they sell that thing along to the next, either business for, final manufacturing or to the consumer.
So why are these cities so expensive? The short answer is because more than 8 million people want to live there.
New York was the top city readers' dream to move to, followed by London, according to a recent Time Out magazine survey. London and New York are both financial and political hubs with a broad set of industries and job opportunities.
I work in social justice. My sector is just less interesting, in my opinion, in the UK than it is here.
Both cities also have vibrant nightlife and cultural events. New York City's nightlife is an over $35 billion industry that creates nearly 300,000 jobs and generates roughly $700 million in tax revenue for the city.
But those stats are pre-pandemic.
New York's restaurant, retail, and recreation sectors lost 4% of businesses as a result of COVID-19. But there's been a rebound. As of April 2023, those jobs are down around 2% from their peak in February 2020. London makes up 25% of the UK leisure economy, which means the city sector is responsible for generating more than £42 billion or nearly $53 billion in 2019. Between March 2020 and June 2021, it's estimated that the UK nighttime cultural economy lost around £36 billion in business, or roughly $46 billion.
In my experience traveling around Europe last year, London was the place that I found to be the closest to New York in terms of there's always something going on, there's always something to do. You're never going to be sitting at home like, oh, what am I going to do this weekend?
Both cities also do not require a car to get by, which can save on transportation costs.
Walkable cities and good cities are more expensive, and they become more expensive because they're valued. If you make places better or you make better places, people vote with their feet. They become more expensive.
London and New York both have world-renowned public transportation systems, but New York's fares are a fixed $2.75 per ride, whereas in London, the further you travel, the more you pay.
I think I prefer the subways in New York because they are cheaper and they're 24/7.
There are more subway stops in New York City than there are in all the other cities in the US put together.
The tube is nicer than the subways because it doesn't run 24/7. And they have attendants always posted.
The London Tube is a lot cleaner, like radically cleaner, like I never saw a rat.
Ultimately, New York City seems to be a little worse for your wallet right now. So if city life's for you and you're willing to pay the price, it may just come down to personal preference.
My impression is that the level of zeal is higher about New York. I think something about New York, whereas like people are so obsessed with living here that they will put up with how gross it is and how hard it is and how expensive it is anyway. And I don't feel like that's true in London.